Welcome to tonight's episode of Navigator Nuggets. I'm your host, Dr. Nicole Rochester, and tonight we are going to be talking about the coronavirus vaccine. I wanted to do another live episode because there's so much going on, and sometimes it's just easier to engage with you all in real time and get your questions, get your input, get your comments, get your concerns, as opposed to doing a pre-recorded video. So let me start by saying happy holidays to all of you. I hope that you had a safe and enjoyable holiday. I know that this is not what we imagined, but there's only a few days left in 2020, and I am hopeful that 2021 is going to be a better year. So I hope that you and your family members are well and safe, and I look forward to having this discussion with you all. And I really want to answer you all's questions. I don't want to give a lecture. I'm happy to, share some general information, but really what I'm hoping is that you all will ask any questions, whether you have already decided to get the vaccine and you still have questions, whether you are on the fence, or if you are a hard no, like absolutely not, I have no desire to get the vaccine. Either way, I would love to hear from you. So just go ahead and type your questions in the comments, and I will do my best to keep up with those. I know that you all have questions. I've heard a lot of the questions offline. I've been talking to friends and family members and even, healthcare professionals who have valid concerns about getting the vaccine. So quick introduction, I'm Dr. Nicole Rochester. I'm a board certified pediatrician, a former family caregiver, an independent health advocate, and the CEO of Your GPS Doc. And this is Navigator Nuggets. This is my weekly show where I basically share tips and inside information with you all to help you and your family members navigate the healthcare system. And tonight we're talking about the coronavirus vaccine. And I just wanted to hear from you all. I know that a lot of people have questions. A lot of people have concerns. It's somewhat controversial. My goal tonight is really to provide information and to answer your questions as best as I can. Now, here come the disclaimers. I am a physician. I am a pediatrician. I am not currently practicing clinical medicine, although I read a lot and I keep my foot in that door as much as possible. But I am not an epidemiologist. I am not a virologist. I am not a researcher. So the information that I share with you all tonight is based on my extensive research. I have read the studies. I have read the papers and additional information. I've been on webinars with Dr. Anthony Fauci and Dr. James Hildreth. And, I've been basically immersing myself in all of the information that is available. So I'm really just trying to kind of relay that to you in a way that hopefully is understandable. But I am not an expert in this particular vaccine, okay? I will give you all a general overview. We could talk about this for 4 or 5 hours. We're not going to do that tonight. But I will start with a general overview, and then, just let me know what your questions and concerns are. There are no silly questions. There are no stupid questions. And I seriously mean that. There's no such thing as a dumb question. And hopefully you all have heard that before, maybe in your schooling. But I really want to hear from you in terms of your concerns. So Yvonne says, should an individual see an allergist first to confirm any active allergies? That's a great question, Yvonne. Generally, what they're recommending is that if you don't have a prior history of allergy, and not just any allergy, but severe allergy, and not even just any severe allergy, but what we call anaphylaxis, which is a systemic allergic reaction that typically, it may start with just some hives and things like that, but often it is characterized by having, a swelling in your throat, difficulty breathing, wheezing, you can have nausea, you can have vomiting, your blood pressure can be low. You don't have to have all of those things, but by definition, anaphylaxis is when, an allergic reaction basically becomes systemic, meaning it's involving more than one of your body systems. So for example, you could have wheezing and you could have like a skin rash at the same time. So if you don't already have a history of something like that, they're definitely not recommending that everybody just go see an allergist to see if they happen to be allergic to anything, that's definitely not the recommendation. And even in those with anaphylaxis, so I have a couple of physician friends who have pretty severe nut allergies, and they were fine getting the coronavirus vaccine, and they've already been vaccinated. And so my understanding from all the research that I've done is that the real concern is if you have an allergy to a specific component of this vaccine. And of course, you may not know that, right? Because it's a new vaccine. So if you've ever had a severe reaction to a previous vaccine, then it is definitely recommended that you probably hold off on the vaccination, but that you at least talk with your physician. And what I would say, you guys are probably going to hear me say this a lot, is that if you have any underlying conditions at all, and you have concerns about whether or not this vaccine is appropriate for you, whether or not it's safe for you to take, I really, really, really encourage you to have that discussion with your own primary care doctor or with the doctor that manages whatever that particular condition is. Yvonne says, take EpiPen with you when getting vaccinated. That's never a bad idea. One of my physician friends who does have a severe nut allergy did bring her EpiPen with her. Thankfully, she did not need to use her EpiPen. And, in these instances, you're going to be getting the vaccine in a setting, or you should be getting the vaccine in a setting where they are prepared to handle any potential allergic reactions. So as an example, right now, of course, the healthcare workers are being vaccinated, and as well as those in long-term care facilities. And what I'm hearing, I have not been vaccinated yet. Let me also say that I am no longer a frontline healthcare worker in terms of clinical work, so I am not prioritized for the vaccine. But everyone I know that has taken it, and I have a lot of friends who have taken it, have said that they are being observed. And so if you don't have any underlying allergic concerns or allergic reactions, then the standard period of observation after you get the vaccine is about 15 minutes. If you have a history of like a food allergy or a medication allergy, not to a vaccine, but just, food or medication allergy, then they're observing those individuals a little bit longer, maybe up to like 25 to 30 minutes, so that they can make sure that they are not having an allergic reaction. So that is part of the vaccine process, at least now, is that individuals are being observed after they get the vaccine. So the way my friends explained it, they got the vaccine, and then they were taken into like an observation area where there were a few other people, and they were all, of course, 6 feet plus apart, all masked and all those things that we're still doing for COVID. And then there was a nurse in that room monitoring them. And then after their, either 15-minute or 25 to 30 minutes, depending on their underlying health conditions, then they would be let go, as long as they weren't having any symptoms. So, but definitely if you have severe allergies, then I definitely recommend that you discuss it with your allergist. And taking an EpiPen with you is never a bad idea. Ethel says, my doctor recommended for me to take Benadryl an hour before and have my EpiPen with me. That is excellent. Excellent, excellent recommendation, Ethel. And I know that you are always in touch with your physicians and you're a strong advocate for yourself. So I'm excited that you've already had those conversations. So, and these are common questions, you all. I think, a lot of people who have underlying health conditions, whether it's an allergy, cancer, I've heard a lot of concerns from people with autoimmune conditions or immune compromise. Many people in those situations are expressing concerns about getting the vaccine. And like I said, if you have very specific concerns that are related to your unique underlying health conditions or related to medications that you take, then you definitely want to have a conversation with your doctor, the members on your medical team, so that they can advise you. So, well, let me just kind of provide a brief overview of this vaccine. Well, as you all know, we're talking about the coronavirus vaccine, right? And the virus that causes COVID-19, which is the name that we've given the disease, but the virus itself is SARS-CoV-2, and that stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2. And the reason it has a number 2 after it is because this is not the first time that we've seen a coronavirus. And that's very, very important as we begin to talk about the vaccine, because one of the major concerns that people have is how in the bleep did they, develop this vaccine so quickly. You all know that, the government has kind of named this Operation Warp Speed, which probably didn't help with public trust. And so one of the huge concerns is how were scientists able to develop this vaccine so quickly? And then another huge concern is, well, if you all were able to do it for this, or a question, then why haven't you been able to do it for something else? So I have heard this, many of my physician colleagues have heard this over and over and over again. So if you all have those concerns, I will try to address that. This is not our first time seeing a coronavirus. In fact, coronaviruses have been around since like 1960s that we know of, and most coronaviruses are pretty benign. They cause the cold, the common cold. But in 2003, I believe it was, is when we first saw one of these coronaviruses, the SARS-CoV-3. I'm sorry, the SARS-CoV, the original SARS virus. And so this is not our first time dealing with that. Also, MERS, which is the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, that was a virus you all may remember that we saw over 5 years ago. And so we have had prior experience with coronaviruses that cause severe disease. And in fact, there have been efforts going on more than a decade related to trying to develop vaccines for coronaviruses. And what happened with the previous outbreaks is that, they weren't nearly as severe as the coronavirus. They didn't have as big of an impact. And so to be quite frank with you, there wasn't this huge push to develop a vaccine. In general, the normal process for vaccine development, part of the reason that it takes so long is, one, money. So, just imagine if you're a scientist, you're in your lab at NIH or some other major, organization, and you come across some discovery, or you're working on a project trying to develop a vaccine. Well, you have to get funding for that research. And so that involves applying for grants, that involves getting money from various sources, trying to get the interests of pharmaceutical companies to, back you on particular vaccines. It also often requires, manpower. And it takes a long time, usually, to recruit individuals for a study. As you all know, a lot of people don't just sign up for clinical trials. And so typically it can be a very long, extended process to, number one, investigate the technology, number two, to recruit the number of people that you need in the trials, to get the money that you need to continue the trials. And so a lot of things in science are start and stop. They'll start something, they'll run out of funding, and that project literally sits on a shelf, literally, and collects dust while something else major happens. And those scientists are pulled over to the next big thing. But what has happened with the coronavirus, as you all know, is that, this is literally a worldwide global pandemic, and millions of deaths have occurred. And so as soon as this virus hit, back in January, we had the genetic code for SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, from China. And immediately, scientists like Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, who works at NIH, who happens to be an African-American female, and her team and other scientists and their teams, once they got that sequence from the scientists in China, they immediately began working on this. Literally. And we're scientists who were working on other things all were pulled. So scientists that were deeply engaged in HIV research, just as an example, were pulled from that. So we had the benefit of scientists all over the world, not just in the United States, but all over the world, making a concerted effort on this one thing, developing a vaccine for or against coronavirus. They also had the benefit of money. So, like I told you, normally you are kind of piddling around trying to get funding for your research projects, but the federal government chipped in billions of dollars because this is an emergency. This isn't just a national emergency. This is a worldwide emergency. So unlike usual, there was tons of funding available for this particular project, to the point where doses of vaccine were purchased even before the clinical trials were over, because they knew that we could not miss a step. We could not waste time, with the idea that if the trials showed that it wasn't effective or that it wasn't safe, guess what? They were going to have to throw all of those vaccines in the trash can and start over. But they were reassured by the very early results of the study. In terms of recruiting people for the study, so I told you all, usually it's a very long and trying process. But again, because of this virus, and because of how it has ravaged the United States and many other countries, there were lots of volunteers. And so the two vaccines that have been approved so far, the one made by Pfizer and the one made by Moderna, combined have over 70,000 vaccine trial participants. And just to put it in perspective, an average vaccine trial may have about 3,000. So we have over 70,000 vaccine trial participants. And so all of those and many other things are what allowed the development of this vaccine to proceed so quickly. And so what I want you to know, and I am convinced of this, and I will tell you all, and I said this last week when we talked about medical mistrust, I am one who did not immediately hop on board for this vaccine just because it's new. And I'm human just like you all are, and I was concerned and I was skeptical and all the things that many of you are feeling before I took the time to really try to delve into the research. And what I am reassured by, and what all of the scientists are saying, and I've read through, literally I've read through the 53-page Pfizer document. I'm halfway through the 54-page Moderna document. I've read other papers related to these vaccine trials, and the science itself was not sped up. Okay, first of all, they were able to capitalize and build on research that had already been done, specifically looking at mRNA vaccines, specifically looking at coronaviruses, and they were able to capitalize on that and then basically just pick up where the other scientists left off and just push forward. So the science is not what was cut short. There were no corners cut or things like that. What expedited the process is everything else, getting the funding, getting the manpower, all the things that usually lead to these huge delays between scientific discoveries and us being able to get those things to the public. Okay, so let me just look at a couple of questions before I go on. So Robin says, my mom is 77, has rheumatoid arthritis. Should she get the vaccine? So again, what I'm going to tell you all in general is that there are very few contraindications to this vaccine based on the trial. But let me be clear, right now the COVID vaccines are in an emergency use authorization. They have not been formally approved by the FDA. And why? Because they only have about 2 months of post-vaccine data. So let me just briefly explain. The two vaccines that have been approved for emergency use authorization as of today are the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine. And right now, they are about 2 months out from the second dose. And so with the Pfizer vaccine, you get 2 doses of the vaccine 21 days apart. Okay, so you get 1 dose, and then you get a booster 21 days later. With the Moderna vaccine, you also get 2 doses, but they're 28 days apart. So while they started, doing research, clinical trials started on these vaccines back in March, over 9 months ago, it took a while to progress through the phases and the trials. And so now they are in phase 3. Phase 3 is when you enroll a large number of real humans, and you basically initially test the efficacy and the safety. So is this vaccine effective, and is this vaccine safe? And so once they had enough data to fulfill the guidelines, and I won't get into all the details, but there are very strict guidelines for the Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, that will allow them to grant emergency use authorization, or EUA. These guidelines were developed long before coronavirus, long before, this vaccine. So I don't want you all to think that they made up some new rules just so they could get the coronavirus vaccine pushed through. No, these emergency use authorization requirements were already in existence. And so every pharmaceutical company that comes up with a vaccine, not just for coronavirus, but anything else, they have to meet certain criteria for the vaccine to be distributed and given to individuals before the final results of the studies are in. So part of the reason that I may hedge on some of your questions when you say, my mom has this, or my dad has this, or I have that, is that right now we're relying on the data that we have from the study. So as I mentioned, there were over 70,000 individuals in these studies. Most of the individuals in the studies are healthy individuals age 18 and older. And that's for a reason. You don't want to initially go testing a vaccine on your most vulnerable population, right? So initially, they usually focus on healthy individuals. And then once they have some data, once they see that, okay, it's effective, it's safe, then they gradually begin adding additional individuals to the vaccine trials. And so they add older individuals, and then they start to add younger individuals. And so with the Pfizer vaccine, they went down as low as age 16. With the Moderna vaccine, they went down as low as 18. But a lot of this information is ongoing. These trials, while the vaccine is currently being used literally for an emergency, the trials are still ongoing. They're still watching the individuals that were vaccinated. They're still enrolling new classes of individuals who were not studied initially. So, younger people, eventually we want to know, is this vaccine safe for kids? Is this vaccine safe for pregnant women? Is this vaccine safe for lactating women? These are all the questions that we still have. And so they're in the process now of recruiting and enrolling even more individuals so that we can add to our knowledge as we move forward. So to go back to Robin's question about your mom, the only contraindications, or the only absolute contraindications that the experts have said in terms of the coronavirus vaccines is if you have a severe allergic reaction to prior vaccines. Now, there are other considerations where, your own doctor may recommend that you wait. But generally, we know that there were individuals with autoimmune disease in the study. They weren't very specific in the documents that I've seen, whether to say, these many had lupus, this many had rheumatoid arthritis. So, Robin, I can't specifically answer your question. I would say that your mom should have a conversation with her primary care physician and or her rheumatologist so that that person can directly advise her. But there are very few contraindications right now to this virus, with the caveat that this virus is still in an experimental stage. The virus is still being studied. I wanted to try to find information about the demographics, just so you guys know. So for the Pfizer vaccine, as an example, the trials had 49.4% females, so very slightly more males than females, but pretty much half and half. 81.9% white, 9.8% African American, 26.2% Hispanic or Latino, 4.4% Asian, and less than 3% of other racial groups. You're very welcome, Robin. And then in terms of ages, 21.4% of the vaccine trial participants for the Pfizer vaccine were greater than or equal to 65 years old. So about a quarter of the participants were either 65 years of age or older, which is really important because we know that, that population is disproportionately impacted. And the median age was 51. But in this trial, they had individuals as low as 16, as young as 16 to 17 years of age. This trial took place not only in the United States, but in Argentina, Brazil, Germany, and South Africa as well. Now, I'm specifically interested, and some of you may be as well, as in terms of the 9.8% African American. And many of my own family members and friends have expressed concern about that. Well, African Americans make up about 12 to 13% of the United States population, and we are always underrepresented in clinical trials, including vaccine trials. And a lot of times, researchers have a hard time getting 3 to 4% representation of African Americans. So while this is not perfect, having about 10% of African Americans in these studies, knowing that we represent about 13% of the population, is actually really, really, really good for a clinical study. So I do want to say that. And then in terms of the underlying conditions, they definitely had individuals with things like diabetes. They had individuals with chronic lung disease, individuals with high blood pressure. I mentioned before that they had individuals who have underlying autoimmune conditions. So there definitely are individuals in the study who are not, the picture of perfect health, but the majority of the individuals who were studied were, otherwise healthy individuals. So let me go back to your questions. Let's see. Kimberly says, if you don't have any health issues, I'm assuming I will be at the bottom of the list. Yes, Kimberly, that is exactly right. So I saw, let me see if I can pull it up on my computer. I saw a document. The CDC has released some recommendations. And what you all need to know is that individual states are making determinations about how the vaccines will be distributed. So there are some differences regionally between what's going on in Maryland, where I live, for example, as opposed to what may be going on in North Carolina or Vermont. You know, the individual states are making their decisions, but the CDC did release some guidelines. And so I'm just going to go over those really quickly. So right now we are in phase 1 of vaccine distribution. And phase 1 is separated into phase 1A, phase 1B, and phase 1C. So based on the CDC work group recommendations, phase 1A includes healthcare workers, frontline healthcare workers, and residents of long-term care facilities. And when we say long-term care facilities, we mean nursing homes, assisted living facilities, things of that nature. So they have been prioritized, probably for obvious reasons. We know that our nursing homes really took a hit. In fact, the first cases of coronavirus that we saw or that we were made aware of in the United States were in nursing homes in Washington state. And, very quickly, this virus just spread through our nursing homes because of the fact that they're older. Many of them have chronic health conditions. They're in close quarters, all those things. So they have been appropriately, in my opinion, prioritized. And then the healthcare workers have also been prioritized because, we need our healthcare workers to get us through this pandemic. And we already know that, unfortunately, some of them have died and many of them have become ill. And so every time a healthcare worker goes out sick, that's one less person who is able to take care of sick patients. And right now we can't afford to have anybody out sick. And so that's in 1A. And then phase 1B, the recommendation is to vaccinate people ages 75 years of age and older and frontline essential workers. So now we're talking about not outside of the healthcare, but like your grocery store workers, your people that are packing our meats and things like that. And I haven't seen any specific details, but, bus drivers, the people that have helped me and you and many others to, kind of, I don't want to say a normal life, but the people that have allowed us to have the conveniences that we have and that have allowed me to be able to, for the most part, stay in my house. So we're very appreciative of them. And then in 1C, the recommendation is other essential workers, however the states decide to define that, and then individuals age 65 to 74, and then individuals, I think that says 64 and under with high-risk medical conditions. So we're starting with long-term care residents, nursing home, assisted living facility, and our healthcare workers. Then we're going to individuals 75 years of age and older and frontline essential workers. And then we're going to go to the individuals with chronic health conditions and other essential workers. So that's all in phase 1. Phase 2, they're talking about, or they're making recommendations for K through 12 teachers, school staff, child care workers, other critical workers in what they call high-risk settings, homeless shelters or group homes, prisons, jails, detention centers, things of that nature, and any older adults that were not already vaccinated in phase 1. And then phase 3 is where they're talking about young adults, children, and workers in industries and occupations that are, quote, important to the functioning of society and at increased risk of exposure. So that's a long answer to Kimberly's question, but yes, Kimberly said, so I need to stay in and try to stay healthy. Absolutely, Kimberly. And that's kind of where I am, right now. Thankfully, I don't have any chronic health conditions and I'm no longer a frontline healthcare worker. So I'm just going to have to sit back with the rest of you. And so, yes. And let me just take this opportunity to say something because Kimberly said, I guess I need to stay in. I do want to mention that even for those of you who may get the vaccine in the next few days, weeks, months, I know some of my healthcare worker, some of my physician friends are watching, and many of you have already gotten the vaccine. And I know you all know this, but it's very important that I say that the vaccine in and of itself that's not going to end the pandemic. And in fact, until we have at least, they're saying, 70 to 80% of the entire United States population vaccinated, which will give us what's called herd immunity, which basically is a fancy word for most of the people are immune to the virus, then we still have to do every single thing that we're doing now. We still have to wear a mask when we're in public or when we're around people who are not in our households. We still have to wash our hands frequently. We still have to physically distance, all of those things. The fact that you get a vaccine doesn't mean that, okay, now I'm good and I can just go out and be willy-nilly. And part of that is because, and this is another concern that comes up, the studies that were done so far, and keep in mind, I've said that these studies, this trial is still ongoing, okay? But the information that we have now, the purpose of the initial vaccine studies was two-pronged: to develop a vaccine that was effective against what they're calling, COVID-19 disease or severe COVID-19 disease, and a vaccine that was safe, okay? We don't yet have the data or the amount of time that will be necessary to study a lot of these other little nuances. And so what they have not yet proven is whether or not this vaccine will prevent you from getting an asymptomatic infection. And what that translates to is we also don't know whether getting this vaccine will prevent you from being able to spread it to others. So what we know is with 95% efficacy, and the numbers are so similar in these studies, you all. I mean, it was almost as if you could just lay them on top of each other. But both of the studies, there was 94 to 95% efficacy in terms of preventing serious COVID-19 disease. And this is after the second dose, okay? Within at least 14 days after the second dose. So what we know is that once you are fully vaccinated, meaning you've gotten 2 doses of this vaccine, based on the studies, based on the 70,000 plus patients that have been vaccinated, I'm sorry, not 70,000, because there's half and half in each group, but we have over 40,000 that have been vaccinated. Based on what we know, once you have gotten that second dose, there is a 95% chance that you will not come down with serious or symptomatic COVID-19. And that's really what we need to be focused on right now, because we need to, prevent death. That's the most important thing. We don't want any more people dying from this horrible virus. And then we also need to make sure that our hospitals are not overwhelmed. And so if we can prevent you from dying, that's a good thing. If we can prevent you from becoming sick enough that you need to be in the hospital, not only does that protect you and your health, but it also protects our hospitals from becoming completely overrun, which is what happened in that surge after Thanksgiving and what they're thinking is going to happen again. But we're still not over that surge, and now we just had Christmas. And so there are states and there are cities where there are no intensive care unit or ICU beds, or there are very little ICU beds. But what we don't know yet, and these studies are ongoing, is can you have this vaccine? Can you get your 2 doses? And while you won't get very sick, can you still potentially contract coronavirus and be completely asymptomatic, but then give that to someone else? And that's why this is only really going to work if most people get vaccinated. Not if a couple of people get vaccinated, not if 10% of the population gets vaccinated, but if the majority of us get vaccinated. And that's why Dr. Anthony Fauci was saying previously that, when they're asking him, well, when do you think we're going to be able to go back to normal? Or when do you think we're going to be able to, put the kids back in school and stop wearing masks in public and all those things? And of course, he doesn't know for sure, but he's predicting, at least next summer, summer 2021, just because he's thinking that's probably how long it's going to take to get the majority of the population vaccinated and protected. All right, let's see. Yvonne says, as this virus, quote, reprograms itself, how will we know the current vaccine will be effective for the new/various strains? Very good question, Yvonne. This is something else that comes up very frequently. And so you all may know that, just to give us an example, the flu shot. For those of us who get the flu shot every year, it can be problematic, particularly for those who develop the flu shot. And the reason that we have to get a flu shot every year is because that virus is very, very, very particular about mutating, which means changing itself. It switches up the game, okay? And so one year it'll look one way, another year it'll look another way, but also there are lots and lots of strains of influenza. And so every year the scientists are behind the scenes a few months ahead of the flu here in the US to predict, okay, what strains are predominant for this particular flu season. And then they have to go and develop the vaccine based on those 2 or 3 strains that they think will be prevalent. Sometimes they get it right, sometimes they get it wrong. And that's why you may hear some people say, well, I got the flu shot and I still got the flu, okay? And just as a comparison, the flu shot, I believe, is about 70-75% effective, Whereas I already told you that the 2 vaccines that have been approved for emergency use for coronavirus are 94 to 95% effective. So just to put that in perspective. So yes, there are some new strains of coronavirus that we are seeing abroad in the UK, and I think they've seen it in a couple of African countries as well. And so there's this big concern, like, okay, you guys went and developed this vaccine against SARS-CoV-2, and now this bad boy is out there mutating and changing itself, and what does that mean for the current vaccine? So what, again, everything I'm telling you are things that I've read, things that I've heard, listened to on webinars and things of that nature. Right now, the current thinking from the experts and from the researchers that are studying the vaccines is that the mutations in the coronavirus vaccine that we are beginning to see emerge in other countries are not significant enough that they will make the current vaccines that are being developed ineffective. Okay, but that's for today. That's what's today. Today is, I don't even know, December 28th. In a month from now, will that be different? Possibly. And if you all want, this is very technical, but if you want to read the studies for yourself, because I know that there's a lot of healthy and appropriate skepticism out here about these vaccines, you can go to fda.gov, F as in Frank, da.gov, and you can literally pull up the committee meeting reports for when they met about the coronavirus vaccine, when they met about, the Moderna vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, and you can read it for yourself. All of the data is there, the number of people, the side effects, all of that information is there. So anyway, based on that, so the coronavirus vaccine, we didn't get into a lot of this tonight, but this mRNA vaccine, what it does is that it codes for a portion of the spike protein. So I'm sure you all have seen that picture of coronavirus, and the reason it's called coronavirus is because it has these spikes on the outside of the virus, and it's similar to what they call a crown. That spike protein is a bad thing. We'll just leave it at that. And that is the part of the virus that really wreaks havoc when it gets into our body and attaches to receptors on our cells. And so the main component, really the component that makes you immune to future coronavirus vaccine infections, or at least the severe infections, is that spike protein. And so the vaccine was developed to, the mRNA in the vaccine basically codes for a part of that spike protein. And then your cells make that spike protein, and then your body goes, uh-oh, this doesn't belong here, let's get rid of that. And so your immune system begins to attack, and then it remembers what it saw. And so the whole point of a vaccine is basically to introduce your body to something foreign in a way that is safe, in a way that is controlled. That's why the studies are done ahead of time. They try all different types of doses to make sure that they, find the one that is both efficacious and safe. And then once they figure all that out, then they do these large-scale trials, which is what they're doing now. And then that's what we are given. And so that spike protein is what has been mutated. But so far, they believe, based on the research that they've done, enough of that spike protein still looks like the one that is in the vaccine, that they're not expecting it to be a problem. But they are being very honest, and they're saying this is an ongoing study. This is an ongoing project. They are going to be doing surveillance, just like they're continuing to follow the individuals who received the vaccine. They are going to continue to follow the developments with the coronavirus that's circulating, with the mutations. And, maybe there'll come a time when the vaccine will have to be modified. I sincerely hope that that is not the case. But right now, the scientists don't believe that these mutations are going to pose a threat to the vaccine being effective. Ethel says newly transplanted. They said should wait. I think she said 2 weeks. It's a go for dialysis patients. Thank you, Ethel. That's good to know. So, I don't think there's not many things that make you more susceptible, you all, than getting an organ transplant or having cancer or like full-blown AIDS. Those are just, several examples where your immune system is wiped out, either because of an infection, which would be the case with AIDS, or with, if you have chemotherapy, that drug wipes out your immune system, depending on what type of chemotherapy you're having. And certainly when you have a transplant, you are taking medications every day to prevent your body from attacking that beautiful organ that you just received. And so, even for individuals who have an element of immune compromise, either because of underlying medical conditions or because of medications that they take for those conditions. What I'm hearing, well above and beyond, is that those specialists are recommending that those patients get the vaccine. Again, you need to have that conversation with your physician. But what we know for sure is that those same individuals are at highest risk for both contracting COVID-19 and dying from COVID-19. And so that's kind of the quandary that we're in right now, is that, a lot of people who have underlying health conditions or who take certain medications are saying, well, I don't want to put myself at risk. I don't want to take this vaccine. But at the same time, you are the very people who are most at risk for, having a serious outcome as a result of contracting COVID. So that's why everybody has to really kind of make a risk-benefit analysis for themselves. And everybody has to, or should, have these conversations with their doctors. And let me just acknowledge, and if you didn't watch last week's episode of Navigator Nuggets, I encourage you to either go to my YouTube channel or you can find it here on this Facebook page. But let me just acknowledge that, for those of you who are concerned, for those of you who are scared, for those of you who have mistrust, I want to honor that. I want to acknowledge that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. We all need to, have some mistrust. We all need to be hypervigilant. And I'm certainly not on here tonight to tell all of you watching, you need to go out and get that coronavirus vaccine as soon as you can. I've shared that I was on the fence a month or so ago. And only in the last week or so now I'm like, yes, I am getting it. I'm telling you, as soon as I can. But that's a decision that I had to make based on the information that I had, based on my health status and my perceived risk and all of those things, and based on, how I want to live my life in 2021. But that's just me. So each of you watching is going to have to make those decisions for yourself and for your family members. And as long as you have all of the information and you have accurate information and you make a decision that's right for you based on that information, I have no problems with you. My concern, and one of the reasons that I wanted to do this tonight, is that what I'm hearing is a lot of misinformation. There is so much misinformation on the internet, on social media, from people who, are pretend like they're doctors, pretend like they're scientists, have another agenda. And so, my hope is that I can come on here tonight and answer your questions and basically just make sure that you have the information that you need so that you can make a decision, which may be, I'm not getting the vaccine right now. It may be, I'm going to wait a few months. It may be, I'm not going to get it at all. But as long as you have made that decision after you have all of the accurate information, that's all that I can really ask of you. Ethel says, my main concern was if they were using a live weakened virus. So nope, Ethel. Yeah, so the flu vaccine is what we call an inactivated vaccine. There are other vaccines that we call live attenuated. So like the MMR vaccine is an example of that. And so there's all types of ways to make vaccines. Part of the reason we think that this particular vaccine is so safe is because the mRNA is not the virus itself. And again, many of us have taken vaccines where the virus itself is what they're giving you, but they're giving you, they've done some things to make the virus less virulent, which is a medical term for powerful, less likely to make you sick, okay? But with this particular vaccine, like I mentioned, you're not getting any part of the coronavirus. You are getting genetic material that makes your cells make that spike protein or a portion of that spike protein, so that if you are exposed to coronavirus in the future and your body sees that spike protein, it's like, uh-oh, okay, we've seen that before. And now your body is already revved up and it's already ready to go. It already knows how to make the antibodies to fight that vaccine, to fight that spike protein. And so that's really the premise behind all vaccines. But specifically, that's part of why mRNA vaccines are so incredibly safe. The other thing I want to say, even though you all haven't asked it, is that mRNA is not DNA. Unlike what you may read, what you may hear, it doesn't have the ability to incorporate itself into your DNA. By no means. It does go into the cell. The cell makes this spike protein, and then very quickly, because of our bodies are just so amazingly created by God, that this mRNA is destroyed by enzymes that we already have in our bodies that are meant to destroy mRNA. So the mRNA comes in, does its job, and then it's out. So please don't believe what you are seeing or hearing or reading in non-reputable medical journals or things of that nature, or on Facebook, whatever, that tell you that this virus is going to integrate into your DNA. As of now, there is absolutely no information that suggests that that is true, and it definitely does not align with anything that we know about mRNA. Okay, but let me go over the side effects, because I know that let me not call them side effects. I'm actually trying not to use that word. What we are trying to use, and this is a much better term, is a reaction. Because in many cases, when you get a vaccine, you are going to have a reaction. And the reason I'm trying to get away from calling it a side effect is that this is kind of expected. Again, when you get this vaccine, what it's doing is it's priming your immune system. It is making your body it's like faking your body out. Like, psych, I'm not really the coronavirus, but I want you to think that I'm the coronavirus. And so many people are going to get some of the same things that would happen to a much, 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 much less degree if you were to become infected with the actual coronavirus. So let's just talk about some of the side effects, and we'll talk about, I'm sorry, I said it again. We're going to talk about some of the reactions. The most common reaction that has been observed and reported in all of the studies that have been completed or that are in progress so far is what we call injection site reaction. So any of you that have gotten a tetanus shot, a flu shot, hepatitis B, any shot that you've gotten, you know that after you get that vaccine, most of us, and I'm definitely one of them, your arm is a little bit sore where you got that vaccine, right? And that soreness may last a few hours. That soreness may last a day. When I got my flu shot back in, I think I got it at the end of October, my left arm was sore for about 2 days. I didn't have to take any Tylenol for it. I didn't have to take any Motrin for it, but it was sore. If I moved it a certain way, I was like, oh, it was reminding me that I had a vaccine injection there, but it was nothing that interfered with my day. This is very similar to what individuals in the trials reported, and also to what pretty much every friend and family member that I have that has gotten the vaccine has reported. And so in the studies, 84% of the individuals, and I'm talking about the Pfizer trial now in particular, reported injection site reactions. So most commonly a little bit sore. You may get a little bit of teeny bit of swelling, a little bit of redness right around that area. And those symptoms usually appeared within a few hours to a day and were gone within a day. So this is very short-lived. Some of the other common reactions that have been noted from these coronavirus vaccines are fatigue, headache, muscle aches and pains, chills, joint pain, and fever. Okay, and these reactions they saw in the trials were more significant in individuals after getting the second dose compared to after getting the first dose. And if you think about what we've been talking about, that makes sense, right? Because you get that one dose and your body's like, okay, this doesn't belong here. Your body starts to mount an immune response, and then your body basically wipes out those spike proteins and goes back to normal. But now your body is smarter, right? Because your body's seen this. So then when you get that second dose, your body is like, okay, it's on. Like, I'm ready for you. And so it's not uncommon for your body to mount an increased response the second time. That's the whole reason we get a booster. And that's the whole reason that we're being given 2 doses of this vaccine. So it shouldn't be surprising that these minor reactions that individuals had were more significant, or they were noted more often after the second dose. But even with those reactions that I just talked about, again, they were very short-lived. So I have a couple of friends who the day after they got the vaccine, they just felt a little bit achy. And Dr. Andrea, if you're still on here, feel free to type in the comments and let the people know, let my viewers know what side effects or what reactions, if any, you had. But several of my friends told me that the day after they got the vaccine, they were just kind of tired. Not like, oh, I can't function tired, but they were like, okay, I feel tired. And then the next day it was gone. Some of them said they felt a little bit achy within a day or two of getting the vaccine. I don't have anybody in my personal circle that I know of that got fever, but certainly I've heard individuals say that for 8 to 12 hours they had low-grade fevers. Personally, I will take all of that over getting sick and potentially dying from coronavirus. But I just want to be transparent with you all, because what we don't want is to paint this picture like, oh, everything's perfect. you're going to get this vaccine and nothing's going to happen. You're going to feel great. And then when people start to get the vaccine, they're like, wait a minute, I have a headache. Or wait a minute, my arm is sore. Nobody told me that. See, you guys lied. And this is what gets us in the position that we're in, where so many people are not trusting of science and of doctors and the medical profession. And there's a whole nother side of that we talked about last week. So we won't go there today. So those are the most common reactions, okay? Now, some of you may have heard that in both trials, there were, I think, 4 in the Pfizer trial and 3 in the Mrna trial who developed something called Bell's palsy. Bell's palsy is where you have a paralysis of one side of your face, okay? It's not a stroke, but it has to do with inflammation or swelling of the nerve that travels through your face. Now, this is the thing. As of now, neither the Pfizer researchers nor the Mrna researchers think that that was related to the vaccine itself. However, we only saw that in people who got the vaccine, and that was in both trials. The thing is, Bell's palsy is pretty, I don't want to say it's common, but the number of people that got Bell's palsy in these studies of 40,000 and 30,000 individuals is very similar to what we would expect in just a normal population. So I don't know if you all have had Bell's palsy, or you may know somebody who's had Bell's palsy. I have had many patients with Bell's palsy. I've had friends who have had Bell's palsy. And so this is part of the challenge with any type of clinical study is, you have to document every single thing that happens to the individuals while you're monitoring them. And these individuals are going to be monitored for, I think, about 2 years. But anytime something happens, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was a result of the vaccine. And so they have made note of this, and they're just going to continue to follow. And certainly if those numbers start to rise, and if we start to see that more people who got the vaccine are developing Bell's palsy at a rate that really is out of proportion to what we would expect in just, the normal general population, then okay, they're going to have to kind of, do some things. And this is what sometimes vaccine trials are halted. But let me just be clear with you all that, again, this vaccine, the very beginnings of these trials started back in March. Mrna had over 40,000 participants. I'm sorry, Pfizer had over 40,000 participants. Mrna had over 30,000 participants. They are still enrolling more individuals, and they are continuing to follow these individuals. So I just don't want you to think that this was just some little haphazard trial with like 10 people in it, okay? I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of individuals. But I did want to make sure that we talked about some of the reactions so that you all are aware of that as well. Let's see, what else do I want to tell you about that? And let me know if you all have any other questions. I'm going to be wrapping up in just a couple of minutes, but I don't want to leave if any of you watching have any questions about the coronavirus vaccine, if you have any concerns that you want to share as well. So just let me know. So we've talked about, the fact that it's an mRNA vaccine. We've talked about the fact that mRNA codes for proteins. It basically provides the instructions to make protein. So in this case, it's providing instructions to make a part of that spike protein, which allows your body to kind of like simulate a COVID-19 infection, rev up your immune system so that, and then you get that booster shot, that second shot, which makes your immune system even stronger, so that after that, and the studies looked at, the efficacy 14 days later, but they did so, and they're not formally reporting this because they can't really make final or formal conclusions, but they definitely saw evidence that there is some protection even after the first dose. But, what the 95% came in at least 14 days after the second dose. And so that, again, all that research is what went into the recommendations for having 2 doses spread 21 days apart for Pfizer, 28 days apart for Mrna. Yvonne, what type of a reaction warrants ERD? Yvonne, remind me what ERD stands for, because that's familiar to me, but I don't remember what that stands for. But if you're talking about, I'm assuming you may be talking about like basically pulling it, stopping the trials, or pulling the vaccine from being distributed. And, I can't describe a specific type of reaction, but certainly death is going to be one of them. They have categorized these reactions into, they have severe. And so when you're looking at severe, you're talking about things like, strokes and heart attacks and death and things of that nature. And there were 4 deaths in the Pfizer trial, none of which have been attributed to the vaccine. So let me just make sure that I say that. But again, I just want you all to know this is how transparent. Emergency room department. Okay, I'll get to that in just a second. I want you to know that they're being transparent. They're not hiding the fact that 4 people in the trial died. And I'm trying to see where I put that information. Here it is. Okay, so in the Pfizer trial, there were 6 deaths. 2 of the deaths occurred in individuals who got the vaccine, and 4 of the deaths occurred in individuals who received the placebo. And I didn't really go into detail about that, but placebo is basically like salt water. That's like, it's not active. It's not the vaccine. And the 2 individuals who died, one had cardiac arrest 62 days after the second dose of the vaccine, and the other person died 3 days after the vaccine. This person had underlying arteriosclerosis, which is like a thickening and hardening of your arteries, and also obesity, and this person died from complications of that. So right now, those 2 deaths are not felt to be attributed in any way to the vaccine. And then there were 4 deaths in individuals in the study who did not get the vaccine, and they one of them had a heart attack, one of them had a stroke, and 2 of them died of unknown causes. So again, I just want to reassure you that these clinical trial participants are being followed. They're still being followed. Now, Yvonne wants to know what type of reaction warrants a trip to the ER, the emergency room. So, you should go to the emergency room really for the same thing that you would go to the emergency room otherwise. So, if you're having a severe allergic reaction, trouble breathing, things of that nature, dizziness, fainting, lightheadedness, severe rash or swelling of your throat, anything like that, then you absolutely want to call 911, go to the emergency room, whichever you feel most comfortable with, depending on your situation. If you're having signs of any other medical emergency, so chest pain, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, signs of a stroke, your speech is slurred, or again, these may have nothing to do with the vaccine, but I would say the same things that would make you go to the emergency room under normal circumstances are certainly the things that would you should seek care for as a result of the vaccine. But generally, as I mentioned, these have been minor reactions. They have been self-limited, a day, 2 days. No one I know has had to take off work because of the reactions from the vaccine. No one I know has been, in bed, severely ill or anything like that. But like I said, they did observe some people having, fever, body aches, headaches, and fatigue. But the most common reaction is a local reaction where the arm that you get it in, it's a little bit sore. If you feel it, it may be, a teeny bit swollen, or it may feel a little bit more firm compared to your other skin. All right, you all. So I hope that this was helpful. Just to be very transparent as I wrap up, yes, I am a physician, but I am human just like you are. I am an African American, obviously, and so I am very knowledgeable about the history of medicine and healthcare and Black people, and so I carry all of that trauma with me the way many of you do, those of you who are people of color. And also for everyone, there's a lot of skepticism. There's a lot of mistrust about our government, the way that, this vaccine seemed to have been rushed, the way that COVID-19 in general has been politicized. And so again, we all have reason to be concerned. We all have reason to be, a little reticent. There's nothing wrong with that. All I can tell you for me is that after doing the research and seeing that over 70,000 individuals were enrolled in these just 2 trials. There are other trials we didn't even talk about. There's an AstraZeneca trial. There are several other trials who I'm sure very soon there will be other companies that will be petitioning the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, for emergency use authorization. But right now we have these 2 vaccines. They're both mRNA vaccines. They don't contain any portion of the coronavirus. You cannot get coronavirus from these vaccines. They have both been proven to be 94 to 95% effective with a very, very, very good safety profile, like 4 or 5% of reactions. Again, no deaths that have been directly attributed to the vaccine. So that data, if you compare that data to what's happening with coronavirus, I'm betting on the vaccine. And I guess the other reason, just to share why I feel comfortable and why I'm planning on getting it is that I don't want to say a normal life because I hope we never go back to how things were, but I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to hang out with my family. You know, we've now spent Thanksgiving and Christmas with me and just my immediate family. I want to be able to hang out with my sisters and my uncle and my nieces and my nephews and my friends and my sorors. You know, so that's part, I mean, that sounds selfish, but that's part of the reason. And, you know, I'm looking forward to us having some sense of normalcy. And the only way right now that we're going to get there is with the vaccine. You know, there are, as you all know, there are really no therapeutics, meaning there's no medical cure. There's no medication yet that we have developed, or that I'm saying we, like I'm in the lab, but there's no medications that have been developed that are effective. There are some even the medications that are being used right now are emergency use authorizations. So you all have heard that term before, you know, related to some of the treatments, the convalescent plasma and the monoclonal antibodies, some of those things that our president got when he was sick with COVID-19. But those things are still considered experimental. And you also may remember that earlier on, you know, there were drugs that were being used like hydroxychloroquine. And then when we had the opportunity to do more studies, it was found that actually that drug is not effective and in some cases harmful. So, you know, as this virus continues to ravage our country and our world, we don't really have a lot to combat it with. And, you know, people are continuing to get sick. People are continuing to die. And I'm honestly very impressed with the vaccine development process. I'm impressed with the scientists and the collaboration that has happened. I'm excited about the transparency around the process, around the data. I'm excited about the government funding that went into this. And so I really just wanted to share some information with you all. Thank you, Nancy. Nancy says you're great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So I hope that this was helpful, you all. If you have additional questions, feel free, you know, even after this broadcast is over, just drop them in the comments. And let me just encourage you, if you're not already, if you haven't liked or followed this page that you're watching me on right now, go ahead and do that. Go ahead and like and follow me on the Your GPS Doc page. I'm also on Instagram, Your GPS Doc, and also subscribe to my YouTube channel. I do weekly videos. We used to do these live on Facebook just like this every week. And then starting in, I think, September, I moved mainly to YouTube. And so I typically will do shorter versions and usually pre-recorded. But there's already lots of videos on my YouTube channel. I encourage you to peruse the video library and go ahead and subscribe so that you get notifications. But really, this is just my little teeny tiny way of trying to give back and trying to help other people understand the science behind the vaccines and answer your questions so that you all can make an informed decision. You're very welcome. Thank you for all of you. I don't take it lightly that you all choose to spend a part of your Monday evening with me. I know that you have many, many things to do. So again, I want to wish everybody happy holidays. I want you all to continue to be safe. I want you to continue to wear your mask over your nose and under your mouth. Okay, wear that mask properly. Wear it out in public. Wear it when you're around individuals who don't live in your household. Wash your hands frequently, clean those frequently touched surfaces, and you know, practice physical distancing at least 6 feet plus. You all, we're gonna get through this. I know it's been rough for anybody watching who has lost a loved one to COVID-19. My heart goes out to you. If you've lost a loved one to something else, still, you have been impacted by COVID-19 because you haven't been able to potentially be with them in the hospital or the nursing home or wherever they transition. You may not have been able to attend a funeral or to, you know, properly say goodbye. So I just want to honor that and acknowledge that because this has been, it has been horrific. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And in my humble opinion, this vaccine is part of that light. It's not everything. There's still other things that we're going to have to do. But I truly believe that this is just a part of the beginning of that light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you all for watching. Feel free to share this video with others in your circle. And I will see you all again next week. I guess I'll say Happy New Year because next time that I see you all, it will be 2021. So happy new year, and please take care and be safe.